Okay. It came up in conversation, I think, in our last year or this year before that. The subject of Elisha Ben Avuha, Acher, came up. And so I thought it'd be nice to tackle that tonight. It's actually very apropos because this said is boy, V'yam Hashem al Moshe boy al Paro k'aniach badati his leibov odov, l'manshisis oisa ela b'kir boy. In order to put these miracles in his midst. So the Al Shulchan Kodesh says something which is tremendously interesting there. Very well observed, but it is the Al Shulchan, so it would be. Of course, you ask any child how many of the Makkahs were in Va'era, and many Makkahs were in Boy, so it's very easy because of Vav and Aleph at the beginning of Va'era, that's 7, so it was 7 in Va'era. And then a base and an Aleph, so that's 3, so it was 3 in Boy. Fine. If you say these, if you use the word these in a sentence, what are you referring to? There's only these and those. Those cookies that we have on the table here tonight, these are these cookies. The ones in the kitchen are those cookies, are they not? So when Hashem says to Moshe, I'm going to do more miracles, I'm going to send you to Paro in order to put these miracles in his heart, in the heart of his servants, what miracles is he referring to? No, these, that would be those. These, the 7 are already happened. I've got to put them in his heart. But hold on, at the end of last week's Seder V'era, doesn't Paro say, Hashem Hatzadik, Hashem is the righteous one, and me and my people, we're the Rishonim? Well, it's the old truism about, words are cheap. Or if you've ever been involved in the world of addictions, in the world of alcoholism, there is a phrase which goes like this: how do you know if an alcoholic is lying? Are his lips moving? Are his lips moving? That, I mean, if you... Sorry?
Politician.
Yeah, they're always lying. Even the lips aren't moving. The thing is that, if you've ever worked with people, unfortunately, obviously in my career, having been the official rabbi to 14 universities for 25 years, I've worked with addiction and people suffering from addictions quite a lot, sadly. They mean it. When they say that they're going to stop, when they say, honey, take me back, I'm never going to have a drop of liquor ever cross my lips again, they mean it at that moment. But meaning it, as it were on your lips, and meaning it in your heart, that's two very different addresses. So it's interesting because until a person means it here, Ramatzia once gave a beautiful mashal for this. He says, you have two shchenim, two neighbors, who live right next door to each other. One's called Reuven, one is Shimon. Reuven is the moyach, Shimon is the leiv. But they never communicate, they never talk to each other. Until that talks to that, then there's no change which is available. So that's rather important, as we'll see, and that fits very nicely as this week said. It's a human condition I think we are all aware of. People say things. First of all, there's the liars and the ones who are channeling the truth to, you, but lying to themselves. There's all sorts of different variations on a theme. In Pirkei Avos, in Dalet and Kof Hey, it says the following thing. Elisha Ben Avuha, we all know this. Elisha Ben Avuha says, if you learn Torah when you are young, when you're a child, what's this like? It's like writing on a blank sheet of paper, on a fresh sheet of paper. But if you learn Torah when you are older, what's it like? It's like writing on a piece of paper or parchment which has been rubbed out. You've erased the stuff that's there before you're writing on top of it. It's not as clear. It's not, as we'll see in a second when we look at another story, and maybe it makes a coating which means that the ink doesn't go in to protect it, so it doesn't go in. But when you learn when you're young, and I think we all know that, what you've learned when you're young, it's ridiculous how it's always there. But if you're struggling, you see that very much in the world of, Valley Tshuva, that, they might become from at 40, 50 or something like that. It's extremely difficult, this whole limited Torah stuff that, a 5-year-old kid or a 6-year-old kid just has in his fingertips. So that's what it says here. Interesting. Of course, Elisha Ben Avuha is usually known by a different name. And the different name is known by is Acher. And of course, he's the Talmud of Rebbi Meyer, which makes him the Grand Talmud, if there is such a phrase. Sorry, the Rebbe of Rebbi Meyer. Sorry, thank you. Which means that he was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. He was the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, etc. So we're traveling back in time to nearly 2,000 years ago, 1,800 and something years ago, when Rabbi Akiva lived just 100 years or so after Chob ben Abayis. So the real question really is, why are we citing him? He was such a bad person. He was of unbelievable madriga, and yet Afal Peking, despite that fact, he became, not only did he become an Epicurus, but he actually became the leader of an anti-religious party. He would go into yeshivas, he would try and pull boys away. The Gemara says, teaching them Greek music, pop music, all that sort of stuff, Greek pop, in order to get them to give up Yiddishkeit. So if he's such a bad person, and we don't even name him, then why do we put him in the Mishnah? Here in the Mishnah, he appears in the Talmud. Obviously, Rabbi Nosson, he appears. So why mention him? We'll see that there's a very good reason, you could argue, for mentioning him. Rabbi Dessler in Chelik Dalet in page 325, we're going to look at 3 references here. Rabbi Dessler says the following thing. He says, every one of us has to be ready and prepare yourself for the Geula when it comes, when Mashiach, when he arrives. The Geula will be a Geula of Emes. This is the Olam HaSheker. But one of the terrible things that God will take the sun from its sheath, from its cover, and we'll all be blinded. It means that the world will be all the liars that we're talking about before this year started, the politicians and all the rest of them, that will suddenly become a world of emes, and it will dazzle and blind the liars. They won't know how to deal with this. And nobody will be able to deal with that unless they've got eyes that can deal with truth and ears that can listen to truth. But if you're conditioned to always be a liar, but you live in a world, a society where lies, it's the norm, then that will be an extraordinarily disturbing development and evolution of the world. Those who are stuck in such a world, they really have a great difficulty when the emes arise. So Rabbi Dessler says, missing out a little bit. If you say something in the name of the person you heard it from originally, then you are bringing Geula, you're speeding up this process of the Mashiach coming, of the emes coming to the world. But isim shom be'ester, you can see this shom be'ester. Rayosam shom be'ester, and the proof we learn from Megillah Esther, v'tomar lamelech b'shem Mordechai, that when she reveals the plot to kill the king, she says it in the name of Mordechai. Yesh asher lo yichbatz. His lashon is very interesting. Listen to this. Yesh asher lo yichbatz l'sheker. There are people who speak and they don't intend in any sense to lie. I don't claim that the brilliant thing that I'm reading to you now, in actual fact, this is my notes, this is my book. I wrote Mixed Million. I'm not saying that. I'm not somebody who's claiming that the words are his when they're not. Rather, the person says, I heard, but he doesn't say, even though he could say, I heard from Rabbi Dessler, you just say it. So he's not lied. He said, I've heard. But there is an element of falsehood in it, because he does know, and he could quote in the name of the actual person who is the source of the statement. Because when the person says, I heard from somebody, but he didn't say who he heard from, then of course the person hearing it from you will say, oh, I heard from Rubenstein or Cohen or Levy, whoever it is, because that's the person that they heard it from. Because you've not sourced it to anybody else, so therefore it will be now, as it were, even by accident, it will be said in your name. But if you say it was Rabbi Dessler who said this, that's who you remember. Then Mamash Das says Shema Devuka B'Makar who Rak Mevil Inun Alof, and that's who you will attest it to. So he didn't lie, but he didn't say it truthfully. He didn't say it fully truthfully. And here he says something. I love this. He says, Darcham Shel HaAngloim. It's the way of the English, not the Scottish or the Americans. Actually, it is, I think. It's the same in your course. Darcham Shel HaAngloim, but Beis Mishpatim, in their courthouses, Shema Shvim, when they make a shavua, the person has to say, swear to tell the truth, emes, v'shekol divrei emes, and everything that I'm going to say is emes, v'she'ein b'divrei klum zulus emes. And I'm going to say nothing that's not the truth. I mean, even from a philosophical point of view, from a secular philosophical point of view, that's a ridiculous claim. I have in my car, having been rear-ended in New York 4 times since I moved here, I have a camera, a video camera, front and back. 4 times, yeah. See, I started driving like a British person. Signaling, slowing down slowly. You're just inviting trouble. Anyway, so basically, but this idea of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you've ever been involved in a court case, if you've ever been involved as a witness in something, and they ask you, "What did you see?" It's amazing. I've got this camera. It's amazing how little you can recall, and now you can stand up and say, "Yes, I remember this from 2 years ago." Yes, and it's a joke. Ki yesh harba ashahu emes. This is the Lashon Rabbi This is proving. There's much which is true. Mikol mokum yesh by mina sheker. But it's still woven into it and woven into the fabric, threads of falsehood. But when this time of the final geula comes, then it's complete emes. Because that is the whole purpose of the geula. And Hashem will only use vehicles which themselves are emistic, and only use people who are emistic. Therefore, he says, and he goes on to say the rather obvious, if Esther had not reported the plot to kill the king in the name of Mordechai, then she would have failed to be the vehicle to bring that particular Geula, that particular Yeshua to Klal Yisrael, to save the Jewish people in the Purim story. And as he's going to say, Hashem has got countless, infinite other vehicles, infinite other ways that he could have, as it were, sung that song with different tunes, but to come to the same maskana. Well, if that's true, that would be a very, very obvious reason why, if it was Elisha Ben Avuha who said this mimer, then it would be an obvious reason why you could not deviate and why Rabbeinu Kodesh could not omit him from the writing when he wrote the Mishnah. This is discussed by the Satmar Rebbe in his wonderful Divrei Yoel.
The question is, why are we quoting him at all?
Yeah.
Or why are we saying the memra
in his name? In his name, yes. Okay. Yeah. In fact, we'll see that in the Satmar Rov here.
I thought the question is why we bring the memra from someone who went off the
so if this was before he went off the derech,
yeah,
that would be perfectly reasonable.
We're able to backtrack his downfall to something that was underlying from way back. So it's not necessarily true that just because he said something before he went off the derech officially, that it is.
Well, there's the famous for about Yishmael, you judge the person as he is now.
Right.
And also Mama Chazal, that never be sure of yourself to the moment of your death.
Right.
So at this moment in time you should really walk out, because who knows, Rubinstein might, go and never do something terrible tomorrow, whatever. Can't think of something particularly terrible.
They had a law in Israel where they don't name streets after people that are still living.
Really?
Because they may turn bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. This is what the Satmar says. So he says, he quotes the Yerushalmi, which Tosfos quotes in the Chagiga, in Tesvav Amud Aleph. Rabbi Meir Hal Yosef V'Dorish B'Beis Medrash Taviria. Rabbi Meir was sitting and he was learning, he was giving a shir in the Beis Medrash Taviria over Elisha Ben Avuha. Elisha Rebbe, his Rebbe. Elisha Ben Avuha went past, and this is after he's gone off the derech. Possibly, min drosha benofik l'gabe. So he stopped in the middle of the shir and he rushes out. He goes out to see his Rebbe. Omali, he says the Mahav is a Dorish, to which Acher, or Elisha Ben Avuha, said to his Talmud, Rabbi Meir, what are you learning today? What are you teaching them? To which he says, Dorish Omali toiv achris dova merishisai. So a pasuk Kahel Zayin Ches, the end of the thing is better than the beginning of the thing. Okay? And to which he said, how are you teaching it? What you're saying with that pasuk? La'adam shalom atayra ben arusay b'shachab z'chanas avakayanas. So he says, well, if you learn when you're young, even if you start to forget towards your end, but it's still, as we were saying before, I don't have a Yerushalmi here, so I couldn't check exactly the tight share, but Havitoiv achras davar mershisai, that's what it means. To which Rabbi Elisha Ben Avuha said to remember, Akiva rebecho lo have dorish kach. Rabbi Akiva didn't explain it that way. You're wrong, Pshat. And that's what he says. I find this interesting, right? So Elisha Ben Avuha, I'm your Rebbe, but my Rebbe, Rabbi Akiva said, your Rebbe, Rabbi Akiva. I'm not sure, but Elisha Ben Avuha, I don't think he learned directly from Rabbi Akiva. Maybe he did, but he said, learn from me. And if you learn from me, then you learn from me. He did he? Oh, no, okay, fine. I used to have a sefer. It was Shilas and Shuvas of the Rif, the Rimigash, and the Rambam. It was Rebbe Talmud. It was very interesting, the commonality. Anyway, so Rabbi Akiva, that's not how he explained it. Ella Toiv Achras Dova Merishisa. Rabbi Akiva used to say, what does that mean? Bizman Shahiyat Toiv Merishisa. It means that, let's the Lashon again. Toiv Achras Dova Merishisa. The Achras Dova will be Toiv Merishisa as a consequence of its beginning. In other words, if you plant in the soil something, whatever it is, tulip or whatever, and you make sure it begins well, if the shoot pops up, then if it's got a good beginning, then Toiv Achris Dover, the Achris Dover, the fully grown plant, will be straight and nice as a consequence of how you looked after it at its beginning. And then he says, very interesting. So he says, "Obi hoyamaisa," and I can give you a moshel for myself. And then he famously says, "So my father, we all know the story. His father was apparently an incredibly rich person. He made a big simcha on the birth of Elisha, and at that he saw two of the Rabbonim sitting to learn after I can't remember who it was for the second. And when they did, flames come down from heaven. He said, if that's the koich of the Torah, I want that for my boy. That's Gebaldik. And so, therefore, he says, and then Elisha explains that since my father's kavanah was not L'Shem Shemayim, as I was planted without, not right. Therefore, it never became straight. My insincere or the lack of getting it right, my father's intention at the beginning, corrupted how I would grow. Okay. And then he goes on to say something else, but jumping a bit. Since his beginnings was corrupted, that meant that what was going to happen to me happened to me. That's to say that Elisha is explaining his situation, his story, as completely a consequence of my parents, not as a consequence of my choice. So this is the classic question of nature or nurture. Was he born that way, or was he nurtured that way? So he was nurtured. I was nurtured wrong. That's how I ended up the way that I am. Fine. And this question, the Satmarov says, "Madur lo kosav Rabbeinu Hakadosh Ma'amar Zev Stama." So Rabbeinu Hakadosh, when he wrote the Mishnah, why not just say this Ma'amar, the emes truth? It's based on Rabbi Akiva, but why not say it Stam? Why say it in the name of Elisha Ben Avuha? However, he says, now we've got an answer to this. Why was it said in the name of Elisha Ben Avuha? Because Elisha Ben Avuha is the perfect marshal to illustrate what it's talking about. If you bring your kid up at the very outset to get it right and to be straight, you'll have a straight adult afterwards. But if you don't, then it's going to be, the likelihood is that your child will be, I'll read this bit so that you can blame it on the Samarov. The Sharash Memazub Nivnas al Yisai Drosh of Rabbi Akiva. That this mimer in Pirkei Avos is built on what Rabbi Akiva said. That everything depends on the beginning. What's the phrases? The philosophers or was it supposed to be the Jesuits or something? Give me the child to 7 and I'll give you the man, sort of thing. What sort of man, of course, they end up with? That's a different thing. But if you get the beginning right, if you launch well, you'll probably sail well. Elisha Hevi al Zeh Moifs Israel Ben Yashiv, and he explained it according to himself. Moshe Nilma da Achas Kamal Kam is Tzorach Lashgiach Moed al Yemei Yaleidus. Yalogus. How much we have to be careful. Now we're getting Musadik. It's not rough getting Musadik. And we have to be very careful when you're bringing up children. That's you lot. I've done it. I just became a grandfather again last night. Just thought I'd tell you that. Thank you. A little baby daughter granddaughter in Yerushalayim. Just outside Bnei Brak. Shoya haskolos yesod binyan ha'odam b'Torah b'alav the b'mara is one of the kedusha b'Torah. Fine. As long as you get it all set up, the yesodis are in place, you bring up children well. And then he says, we've got to get to this bit. However, and therefore that's the dimyon. He says that if you learn it when you're young, it's like writing on the paper. It'll write beautifully, you'll see it, you'll remember it, what you're teaching the child will be through. But if it's later on, not so good. It'll not stick there. Oh, hold on a second. Doesn't the Ramban Shalom accept Bali Tshuva at every stage in their life? How old was Avram Avinu when Avram Avinu found Hashem, right? He had a father who was, etc., etc. V'ksiv, Toshev Anish Adaka, and the Pasuk says, but if you've lost that beginning, you don't have that outset, yeah, you'll do it, but it will be extraordinarily difficult for you to achieve really repairing the damage of those missed years. And you won't really have the full ability to defend yourself from Yitzhara. And that's why he says it b'Shem Elisha Ben Avuha. Okay. So in other words, we start off by saying, of course you've got to say it in his name, but on the other hand, why not just you say it stam? We do that elsewhere. Saying a Mishnah stam is therefore doesn't seem to be offending what Rabbi Dessler said about not saying it in somebody's name. But in this case, it's particularly appropriate because Elisha Ben Avuha, he is the paradigm, he is the exemplar of this whole concept. So far, so good. It's very unusual to quote Rav Shamshon of Hirsch in the same breath as Samarov, but anyway, see, good cheer. Good. This is in Chorev, and it's in his Chelik called Chukim, and it's chapter 67. It's guarding against immorality, and he's the sexual immorality. And then at the end of when he's gone into exactly how important this mitzvah is and what it entails. And then he writes the following thing that I can't remember exactly when Chorev was published. No, I don't want to take too much time away from this. Just quickly look to see if my eye falls on it at the beginning. I think it was 1814, round about those times. Anyway.
The book's yellow on it.
Yes. So this is what he says. And as for you Jewish parents, and as for your Jewish parents, do not forget that it was this time when you yourselves were young that the decline began. Sin has made giant steps since you were young. Keep guard over your children. Some already move in the direction of this sin, that's the immorality sin, in the 10th, 9th, and 8th year. Test the schools, the playmates, the servants, the friends of the house. Know that vice enters into the circle of youth by every way. Become the friends of your children. Give them early warning. Stand by their side in their battle. Do not leave them just in those years when the battle is hottest. Above all, clarify to them their mission as men and Israelites in its holy purity and its noble greatness, etc., etc., etc. Same idea. Fine. Yeah. So, according to what we learned so far, Elisha Ben Avuha, it says, as the Gemara says, that it's entirely the fault of my parents. Rabbi Dessler quotes this Gemara more fully than I did, and goes on and says the following thing, having explained. Harishi itself letarbas ra hayaso machmas rotzen ovid lamosa isa limitar novas mitashal shma. The idea of him going off the derech is because his father launched him inappropriately for the wrong reasons, for the wrong motives. He wanted him, to have the flames. My son is so important, Kivin Shara is kavod havodas the Torah, because he saw the incredible power that the Torah has. The Gemara from Oitamin, but the Gemara there, which I didn't read to you, goes on to give other reasons why Elisha Ben Avuha went off the derech. Now that certainly seems to have been a component. His father's motivation and therefore education of his son seems to have been flawed at the beginning. Okay. However, I have to tell you, Rabbi Dester, right at the beginning of Mikta Milio, I'm sure you're familiar with this. He talks about his own upbringing. He never knew his real mother. I think he was just after he was born or whatever, and his father remarried, and the way he speaks about his stepmother is with such love and such affection and such respect. And he writes there how that every Friday night, his father and his uncle used to sit learning up every single, all the way through Friday night to Shabbos morning, as I'm sure we all do, and then going to shul. His mother, the Tzedekis, he writes, the mother Tzedekis used to sit up learning the Sedra with a Medrash Rabbah, the Ramban, and the Malbim. And she made kuchen, not kugel, special cake, kichlach, he writes, which and coffee. And because of course every child wants to be like the father, and as a consequence, therefore he begged them to. He was allowed to stay up with his Rebbe learning. There was a Rebbe who was paid for him. They're very rich, the Deslers originally, and he says there that I'd have to admit that most of my motivation was sparked by the fact I wanted to be like the adults, because every kid wants to be like the adults, wants to be like the grown-ups. I told you about Matasio and my chavrissa, about whether he should take time off to teach his son about Torah. This is worth a slight tangent. When I was learning Gates and Shiva, there was a fellow there, he was a Baal Shuva, and we were chavrissas in the afternoon for a while. Lovely fellow, he's a doctor, and he used to, he had a very large family, and he used to practice, he was a general practitioner, generalist, and he used to work as an MD in the morning, and the rest of the day he could sit and learn. And then at one stage, one of his kids got a letter home from school saying that he was falling a little bit behind in Shlayas or whatever it was. He did a little bit more of a boost and advised that he should find him a Rebbe. So my Chavrusa said to me, I'm not sure what to do. Should I take time off my own learning to learn with my son, or should I get him a Rebbe? And of course he asked me, and it was so obvious, because I'm one of the giants of the generation, exactly what you should do, because I said to him, well, I think it's obvious now. It says, Vishinantum levanecho, you should teach your children, so isn't it obvious what you should do? However, he went to discuss it with Ramatzio, who told him quite the opposite, which is why he's an authentic Godel and I'm not. And he said something which I thought was so clever. As Rashi points out, every child and every culture in the world, when they leave school at the end of the school day, how do they leave school at the end of the school day? They run away from school. And he says, if you're going to take another hour away from his precious free time when he gets to kick a ball and, relax a little bit, you're going to take time away from that, another hour, he'll resent it, he'll reject it, and it won't be successful. However, if you pay one of the Bochrim in the yeshiva to be his Rebbe during that hour, and he comes into the base of Medrash of Gesed Yeshiva, at the other side of the base of Medrash, there's his father sitting learning with his chavrissa. Every child wants to be a grown-up. If my daddy's taking it seriously, I want to take it seriously. And so it's the same thing. So Rabbi Dessa says it's the exact same idea. He wanted to be the grown-up, or be like just like the grown-ups, but he said, I had to admit that the smell of that coffee and the taste of that special cooking that my mother only made for Shabbos, that was part of the motivation. And of course, as we know, the Gemara says, a person must always do things afila shalol lishma, shemitah shalol lishma bol lishma. That is the only way you can do it. So if you start off learning Torah because you like the idea of having a frock coat or a rabbinical coat with 2 buttons at the back and people standing up for you coming in through, okay. If that shalol lishma is what gets you into the base of Medrash, you will graduate. Reb Simcha Zissel, the grandfather of Rabbi Dessa, says, what nonsense. What nonsense this is in my Chazal. You always have to learn Torah mitzvah shalol lishma. Shemi Torah shalom abol lishma. Don't you know anybody who learned Torah shalol lishma who didn't graduate lishma like Elisha Ben Avuha? I can think of more than Elisha Ben Avuha. So he says that, because this will point out, is Medayik, the Lashon of the Gemara is, La'olam ya'asa odom b'Torah mitzvah afil shalol l'shmo, shemitoik shalol l'shmo b'l'shmo. If your intention is to utilize shalol l'shmo, mitoik shalol l'shmo, to bring it to l'shmo, then it'll bring it to l'shmo. But if you don't, then it won't. And that's going to be very crucial what he says here. There are other reasons. When Elisha Ben Avuha was learning in the base of Medrash, Harba Sifra Minim Nisrafa B'Kekre. He had tucked into his jacket all sorts of Aristotelian tracts and all sorts of stuff, all sorts of apicurses, as the Gemara says there. And Moses Kedusha says, he saw somebody went up into a tree to get some eggs, and he didn't do the mitzvah shliach as a can, and he came down. But somebody else went up and did the mitzvah shliach as a can, and fell and killed himself. And he famously said, this is the Torah, that's the reward for keeping the Torah. And the Yerushalmi brings another reason. His mother, when she was carrying him, she used to go to places of Avodah Zarah. And she used to smell the sacrifices, exactly what that means. I think that's a euphemism for other stuff, which I'm not going to say because we're being recorded. And there might be children watching. And it spread throughout her and poisoned her. There were other reasons as well that could have led to that. So Elisha Ben Avuha going off the derech. Aha. Chelik Dalet, page 289. Rabbi Dessler. Back to Rabbi Dessler. Don't want 289? I thought I wanted something before. Don't want 289? Hold on. Small commercial break here. 175. No, we did that. Okay, fine. Yeah, I do want 289. Good. So, Rabbi Dessler says an incredibly interesting thing. I really should go on a little bit with the previous bit because there's something really juicy here which I do want to tell you, which is Gimel 175. Where's my Gimel? 175. Listen to what he goes on to say. He goes on to say, after this idea that we said, that really, and this is, sorry, not 175, page 178, Hatayvas Sibel Aminos. In Rabbi Dessler, if I remember correctly, I can't remember the page number, he's got an essay called Mi Oilam Lo Hoyo Apikoros Amiti. There's never been a real Apikoros. Somebody says he doesn't believe, it really means he doesn't want to believe. He doesn't want to believe. And there's a famous story, it was Strasland or Chaim Volozhin, I think it was Chaim Volozhin, who had a Talmud who went off the derech and he became a professor in Berlin, which incidentally is not something to dismiss because the Messianis of learning Torah in Russia in the old days in Little. Did you ever read that book, All for the Boss? To me, the most interesting thing of All for the Boss was the description of Mir and how they literally had one stove to keep them warm, and inside the house was literally everything else was frozen, and how they slept in their clothes, because you could freeze to death, and the poverty they had, they experienced was absolutely horrific. My late wife's Zayda learned Slobodka. He was one of the rich bochrim. He had a whole herring to himself for Shabbos. A herring. Herring's outside bread. For Shabbos. Wow. When people, if you could afford a loaf of bread, that's incredible. So of course the Maskinim came and they said to the bright, brilliant young minds in Yeshiva, Mir and various other places, and that scholar was extremely successful in Lithuania. I speak of the Litvak. Tremendously successful in Lita. And it was a horrific temptation. And many took their brilliant minds. Come and use your brilliant mind. You come to a professor in Berlin. That was the great place to be at the time. But he came back to see his old Rebbe, even though he rejected everything his Rebbe stood for. One day, and he took him in and had a meal. And when they sat down to schmooze, he famously said, there's a famous story of this, he said, Rebbe, there's always been 2 or 3 questions I've had with Yiddishkeit. Maybe you could help me. So Chaim Volozhin said, did you have the questions before you went off or after you went off? He said, after I went off. I can't help you. There are only answers to questions. There are no answers to answers. In other words, when we do something wrong, we all know we're doing something wrong. You feel you're doing something wrong. You don't feel comfortable because you feel you've done something wrong. But if you can make this something wrong right, if you can justify it by saying that it's not wrong at all, then you feel good. That's what he's done here. He'd already gone off. He wanted to go off for whatever reasons, to become rich, become famous, whatever it was. Afterwards, he's got questions, of course, because that generates the justification for going off in the first place. So he said there are no answers to questions. It's answers. There's only answers to questions. You don't have any questions. If you had a question, you should come and ask me before you went off. And then we'll be able to answer the questions. Here, Rabbi so he says that there's no such things in the Chelik Aleph as an apikoros amiti. Somebody who goes off, he wants to go off. He knows that this is a nonsense. This is a justification. He quotes David HaMelech and Tehillim, Shemaim Misaprim called Kale. The Shemaim declares the existence of Hashem Yisborach. Time magazine, many years ago, when I used to get Time magazine before it was so profoundly anti-Semitic, they had a whole thing on, I think the front page was scientists prove the existence of God. It sounded very radical for Time magazine. And it was simply saying that there are so many proofs in the structure of the universe, like the universality of pi, running through the entire universe. And of course, if you've got, as it were, such a common signature running through the fabric of the universe, it tends to suggest somebody signed off on it, etc. A very, very interesting thing. So if David HaMelech says, you can prove from Shemaim. So the question is, how come people don't see it? Because they won't see it. Here he says, he's got a little essay here called the Taiva Sibul Aminos. Taiva is a Sibul Aminos. Taiva is a Sibul Aminos. And this is the famous Gemara. The Gemara famously says at the time of Churban Bas Rishon, Klal Yisrael was afflicted by an affection for Gilead Raish, which was done on Avodah Zarah, but it goes on to say that really it was all about sexual immorality, as we saw from Shamshon and Paul Hirsch. The Vilna Gaon says of all human dynamics, that's the most powerful, the sex drive. So therefore, you could imagine that when it comes to politics, like today in today's world, sexual politics, homosexuality, transsexuality, all these things are stand up and criticize even a tiny bit, and boy, you'll be crucified for this. But at the time, it was that. That's what we were after. If a person wants, he says, minus, because minus allows you, if you turn around and say, just as we said from Chaim Volozhin, you don't have to do this stuff anymore. Or if they did Avodah Zarah, why did they import Avodah Zarah? Because Avodah Zarah is perfectly okay. Murder, you want somebody's wife, she's an attractive girl, fine. Is anything you fancy her? Kill the guy and take her. So there's be reasons why a person would go off the derech. Sure. Here is an incredible little tiny Rabbi Dessler. This is in 289. Birshami Chagiga, and Tosis, as we said before, in Chagiga is all the same daf, Tesvav, Perish, Acher le Rebbi Meyer, Hatam Lama in a Chayz B'Tshuvas. Rebbi Meyer says, on one of the other dialogues that they had, the many ongoing dialogues, why don't you do Tshuva? Because Acher already explained to them that Tshuva is available to everybody. Gavaldik! No! He says, no, I'll tell you why not. Kipam Achas Hayel Roika Baltzusay B'Yom Kippurim. Shkal Yes B'Shabbos. Once he was riding along in his horse on Yom Kippur, which happened to be a Shabbos as well. So you got like double Kedusha, and he's riding on his horse. And it looks the Osar, not so good. Bovar al Mokam Besa Kodsh Kedoshim. He's riding his horse and he comes to a place of the Kodsh Kedoshim. Let's go for a nice ride past there with your horse in the Beis Hamikdash. The Shoma Bas Kol. And when he passed there at Bas Kol, he heard saying, Shuva Bonim Shavavim. My sons, it was Yom Kippur, a voice from heaven saying, my sons, do tshuva. Chutz min l'shuva nevo, apart from l'shuva nevo. Klal Yisrael, do tshuva, except that guy Acher. Not welcome. Sheyodo koich l'morad bi, because he knows me, he knew me, and he rebelled against me. Not interested in him. Rabbi says, V'tzorach Ian. Excuse me? Ich yitochen. How is it possible that there could be a bas kol like that from Hashem Yisborach? There is nothing you could do or have done that Hashem can't forgive.
We're taking it at face value.
Sorry?
We're
no, we've got a few lines. We're not taking it at face value. But that's the question. That's the premise, yeah. V'shemati b'shem abesht. So Rabbi Dessler says, I heard the name of Baal Shem Tov. Zal shabas kol zu bo misitra achra. This bas kol wasn't from there. That was from there. perish, and what does that mean? Because it means in the depths of his heart, he didn't want to do it. He generated a bas kol. He was convinced that his tshuva would never be accepted. Or he convinced himself as a heta to carry on doing the stuff that he wants to do. The Romans apparently had orgies. Well, that's well known. But a Lubavitch friend of mine, who's a bit of a scholar, pointed out that they used to hang human skeletons around the wall. Human skeletons. The meaning was, we're all going to end up there anyway. You might as well have a nice time while we're here. Right? Just live, flawless, love and life and be merry, or whatever the expression is, right? That's a justification for doing something which is sickening and totally immoral. Really, he wanted to do this. Perish by omak libo l'rotza achla as tshuva. In the depths of his heart, he didn't want to do it. And Misham ba bas kol, and that's where the bas kol came. I have to tell you a story. I've got a very, very close and dear friend called Avram Katz. Avram Katz was the secretary of Gates of Yeshiva in my time. He was very talented, very good person. Very good person. And he felt himself to be, I don't know if I told you a story, he felt himself to be, to be the secretary of the Yeshiva is a nice thing, but it's not, he felt he could be giving a lot more to Klal Yisrael. He actually founded the second seminary in Gateshead. Of course, Gateshead Seminary, founded by Rabbi Dessa, is probably still the most famous, if not the most famous seminary in the world. And now there's a second. Both my daughters went to a very fine seminary, Rabbi Katz's seminary. But at the time, before he got to that stage, he was feeling frustrated. He felt that he and his wife, they should move to Eretz Yisrael, we could find something new to do there. Ramatzio hadn't come to a conclusion how to advise him, and he was sitting in Ramatzio's house in Windermere Street, that's just up the road from Gates of Yeshiva. And whether he wanted to, I think he was to come back the next day, and Ramatzio was going to think it over. Gateshead is a remarkably anti-Semitic part of the world. Tremendous anti-Semitic. You walk down the street and it's all white people, and old people will come up to you in the street and spit in your face. Literally. Make jokes to your face about the Holocaust. And the fights there with the young, the youth of Gateshead are, in the highest scale, pretty low down. And there's always fights, and it's nasty stuff. When I was there, I was always getting into fights.
They need football.
Sorry? They need lobotomies. But anyway, so basically, he's walking down the street. If you're born in the northeast of England, you are a Geordie. If you come from Glasgow, you're a Glaswegian. If you come from Manchester, you're Mancunian. And that very small island has got over 30 different accents. And they've got a very distinct accent. So this old Geordie on the other side of the street, and Rabbi Katz is walking to his house. And this old guy shouts at him, "We aye? You, Jew? What you doing here? This is not your place. You don't belong here. Why don't you go and live in Israel? That's where you belong. Why don't you go to Israel?" And he walked off, and Rabbi Katz went, "Bad call!" Right, rushing back to Mansio, rushed in and said, "You're not going to believe this." The whole Shiloh were discussing it, and out the blue, this old guy, he didn't shout, "Die in Auschwitz," or the sort of things that they usually shout. "It's you, Jew, you don't belong here. Where you belong, Israel? Why don't you go and live in Israel?" Rabbi said, "What makes you think that the message came from there? Maybe the message came from down there." Interesting. Now we're doing nearly out of time. There's another Rabbi Dessa which I wanted to share with you, and that's in Chelik Beis. This is, I think, fundamental. Maybe we'll get to next week. I want to, the famous story about Rebbi Meyer getting Acher out of hell. We'll maybe get to share that with too much time or two. But this is very interesting. And Parshas told us, Rabbi Dessa in Chelik Beis asks a very interesting question. Was Esau fated to be a baddie or a goodie? Good guy or bad guy? That's what he says. Ach zeh borer. But this is absolutely crystal clear. Shalom nolad Esau lias Rasha. Esau was not born to be a Rasha. Shematzina, wait a minute. I know you're going to say Shematzina boy kama tachanis amaras es kashrusay letzada Esther bara. There are many indicators in the birth of Esau, from the moment of the birth of Esau, that he was designed for bad stuff. Adamoni kamalon adgar atzer, that he was red. I don't think there's anything wrong with red beards, actually. And he was covered in hair, like a blanket of hair. That's all needs a moshel. Seir, incidentally, is a moshel for rishus, because it gets dirty. If you're bald, you don't have to wash your hair too often. Well, you have to go to the shower a bit, it gets dirty. Kashoy said Rivka Oberes Al Piski avoided Zora when she was pregnant. Rivka's mother was pregnant with him. Oh, some of this is a Kedaima. When he would go past the place of Zora, he just jumped up and down in the womb. Oh, I can hardly wait to get there. I'll call Ela Inim Morim El Al Toikev Avoida Shoyzam life. Yeah, indeed, he had a certain inclination, a certain attraction to all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, he was given the koichos to fight against all that sort of stuff, and that merely indicated what his path should be. Like famous Chazal say, if you're born bloodthirsty, then you become a moil, or become a shoicher, or something like that, channel it in a positive direction. But it doesn't mean, says Rabbi Dessa, he was fated to be a bad guy. He took it in that direction. Elisha Ben Avuha blames it all on his parents. Oh, no. So who didn't have bad parents? Avram Avinu? Ooh, nope. He had a father called Terach. And then Yitzchak. Look, it's a small group here, and the camera's not pointed at you, so don't be embarrassed. Anybody here ever had any of your fathers ever tried to cut your throat and burn your body to a crisp? No? Okay. Anybody come from a dysfunctional family? Like all the Ovas, not all the Ovas, but certainly the Amos all came from profoundly dysfunctional families, right? And so, if anything, the story of Klal Yisrael, the journey of Klal Yisrael, as for Yechidim, apart from being a Klal Yisrael who were as bad as the Egyptians in Mitzrayim, the protest, of course, of the Malach of Mitzrayim is, your lot are as bad as my lot. But the whole story of Klal Yisrael is that in individuals having tough backgrounds, conquering that. Elisha Ben Avuha was not forced by the fact that his father's lack of sincerity determined who he was. That's a teretz. Just like the Baskel, that's a teretz. And there are no answers to tradition. It's only when he'd actually, or if he'd actually during his lifetime, it happens after his death, which is a different story, we'll get to that next week. Just because we're running out of time, but another year for next week, but don't worry, we'll just finish that off. But he could easily have conquered that. After all, he was, Elisha Ben Avuha, the Rebbe of Rebbi Meyer. And you can't get to the Rebbe of Rebbi Meyer unless you are a giant beyond our comprehension. He could have beaten that stuff. He chose not to. For all the excuses in the world of it's the way I was brought up, and that's why I had to become a mass murderer, because my father was unemployed for a week. This is not a Jewish position. Ultimately, of course, where Rabbi Deska tons on this subject, your background is enormously impactful in the person you become, but it doesn't determine the person you become. You still have choices. Elisha Ben Avuha could have never had the name or the title Acher attached to his name.